Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. I got a tiny bit of a cold, so I promise I will try my absolute hardest not to cough into the mic, but please excuse my overly nasally voice and probably a turn and cough at least a couple of times in this one. But anyway, let's jump in and see what we got this week. First up, Brendan, aka Bastish B64K, has finally finished his complete documentary review of the Sega Genesis Mega Drive. And this is a video that's over 11 hours long that starts out with a short history of the console with some pretty cool info and then goes into reviewing basically every single game sorted by year. So this is a huge undertaking. There's over 650 game reviews, a whole bunch of guest appearances in this one. I'm one of them. This was the video that I didn't even remember doing when the first part released a while back, but it's really cool. I loved hearing a lot of people's perspectives on different things. And for me personally, I don't think I watched all 11 something hours yet, but I definitely have been watching it by year and just kind of checking out the different games that I'm interested in. And, everybody's different. I mean this as a compliment, but for me personally, when I'm perusing a video like this, I like to leave it on in the background when I'm doing other things. And, I'll glance at it, and when a game comes up that I'm really interested in, or if I didn't think I was interested in the game, but it kind of sounds cool, I'll stop and rewind it a little bit and kind of watch it then, and then go back to doing other things. But honestly, any way you want to consume this video, I think this is one to, at the very least, bookmark and reference if you ever want a pretty cool game review and just an overview of what to expect from some of that stuff. I doubt many people will be sitting and watching an entire almost 12-hour video in one sitting. Although the first time I got that nasty case of the Rona, I did watch The Last Dance all in one day, which was pretty incredible actually. But anyway, and if you want to hear more from Brendan, please check out the interview we did a while back. And if you want to support crazy videos like this, Brendan does have a Patreon, but everything is completely free to watch for anybody that wants it. So check this out if you're interested. And I really strongly recommend, at the very least, bookmarking this and skimming through it whenever you want to reference a game or something like that, because this is just really cool and totally understandable if you don't want to sit through, almost half of a full day of one video. But I think most people who are interested in the console might reference this a bunch of times over the years. Next up, Krix has just released a new version of the Turbo Everdrive called the Turbo Everdrive Core, which is essentially the Pro without CD optical drive emulator functionality. And while he just did this with the Genesis ROM cart, for me personally, this one makes a ton more sense. And I'll very quickly go over why. Check out Alex's post that has all of the info and the comparison charts, but basically, the Turbo Everdrive Pro isn't cheap, but it's fairly priced, and it does everything that you could need to do, including CD-ROM emulation, as well as if you're using one of those compatible adapters or internal mods, you then could also get stereo audio for all CD games as well. But if you already have a Duo and all the CDs you want to play, or you don't really need to play any of the CD games, you could have gotten the Turbo Everdrive version 2, except the new Turbo Everdrive Core also has arcade card functionality, in-game menu, save states, 10-key saves, cheats, and a couple of other stuff like switchless region auto detection and stuff like that. So this one actually makes sense as to why you would buy this over just the Turbo Everdrive version 2. And I think this was a great addition. And I'm not sure if he's just going to be continuing the original Turbo Everdrive version 2 at some point, but it makes sense to have these two as the main ones. So the Turbo Everdrive Core is now at $99, which I think is an excellent price for something like this. And the Pro is still the one that you're going to want if you want complete full functionality with everything you could imagine. But I think this one's cool. And I do think the Mega Everdrive ones were a little bit confusing, but this one isn't. This is very clear to me, at least. And, I think it's just a great idea, and it'll allow a lot more people to jump into this at an easier price to pay. And if you want to check out the Turbo Everdrive review, GameSack did one a while back. So, check that out and see what the Pro could do. The company Arcuda has just announced 5 new 4:3 aspect ratio LCD monitors that are supposed to be arcade monitor replacements. And just to go back for a second, Arcuda was the brand of monitors that a couple years ago I reviewed, and they were almost zero latency. It was 2 milliseconds of lag. And it could also do sharp scaling as well as accept 240p signals properly, which means if you wanted to, you could connect your 240p directly to this and let it scale whatever it is that you have. And the sharp scaling certainly wasn't a RetroTink 4K, but it was better than basically every other monitor I've ever seen try to do a sharp scale. Usually turning the sharpness up on monitors just adds horrible ringing and makes it look bad, but that's not what these did. It was very respectable, especially considering the price and their use case. So that same thing is being applied to these. However, they're going for sizes 20, 26, 27.5, 29.3, and 33 inches. And they all will accept 15 kilohertz natively, but they'll all do the same sharp scaling. And they all have, they also will accept 24 and 31 kilohertz as well. So basically all retro stuff, but they have a native resolution of 1600 by 1200. So you could run that directly, like if you're using a Mister or something like that. And they're all designed to be exact drop-in replacements for existing arcade monitors. Now, look, everybody listening to this would rather have a brand new, from the factory CRT and chassis installed in their arcade machine. That's very obvious, but that's not a thing that's ever going to happen. So your choices are to refurbish all of this stuff yourself, which, I have a lot of friends that love doing restoration. The whole process makes them happy, and that's awesome. But I also know a lot of people that don't like doing that or don't have the skills, which means you have to pay somebody to do it, which is really, really expensive. So you need alternatives. And of course, the second best choice that all of us would want is an OLED curved in the same shape as a CRT with a RetroTink 4K built in and BFI and mask emulation. But that's going to be almost the same price as having a CRT refurbished. And these are looking to be realistic next steps to that. So these, the pricing hasn't been announced yet, but they're aiming to be reasonable for what you're getting. They're not going to be $1,000 monitors, that's for sure. And they're aiming to just be bolt-in direct replacements, including having some bezels made for the most common arcade caps, like the standard candy cab style stuff. I'm sure they're going to have Blast City bezels and all that so that you could install these in and have something that feels pretty close to the original, but without all of the work that it takes to get there. So I just want to repeat myself again. I'm by no means saying this is what everybody should be putting in their arcade machines, but I think anybody that has more than one arcade machine knows that sometimes you just don't really have a choice. What if you got a rare chassis and tube that you just can't find a replacement for, or it's a strange size or something like that? I mean, there's always hoops to jump through, and I think stuff like this is absolutely going to have its place and be something that many of us appreciate. So we'll update everybody as soon as there's pricing and other details like that. Hopefully there's some more fun things to announce with them. I'm not sure exactly when they're looking to hit the market, but I would say definitely this year and hopefully by summertime. And if you want more details, check out the video they just did. But I'm excited for this because I think there's just a lot of applications for this, including just do-it-yourself arcade machines. I mean, while once again, all of us would love to have a CRT, building your own arcade setup and having something that you could easily rotate and not have to worry about degaussing every time you rotate it. I mean, there's a lot of applications for this that I think are cool. And the fact that they're 4x3, super low latency, and can accept all of the input signals, including direct from arcade boards if you buy one of their little adapters to go with it. I think this absolutely has its place. I'm really, really looking forward to hopefully borrowing one to test out on a live stream like I did with the other two. And if you're interested in what those were like, please check out those videos and just expect that this processing board that's in there is going to be the next generation of this. So everything that's good is the same with a bunch of stuff improved upon it. But yeah, I'll update everybody when there's more info, but this one's exciting. Next up, there is now an update to the DB GrafxBooster that allows stereo audio to be passed from the Turbo Everdrive for CD-ROM emulation. So I'm going to take a step back for a moment. If you already know what that is, maybe skip ahead, but the DB GrafxBooster is a plug-and-play device for any PC Engine or TurboGrafx console that has the pins in the back. So basically all except the handhelds and the duos. And it is absolutely the go-to if you want S-video and composite video broken out, as well as a Genesis 2 DIN that allows for RGB as well as composite video. And it was my go-to recommendation up until the EDFX was released because that passes stereo audio from the Turbo Everdrive. And obviously anything that was made before the Turbo Everdrive Pro was released wouldn't have that feature. And just to reiterate again, the Turbo Everdrive Pro can pass mono audio from CDs to anything just through the DIN. Stereo audio from Hue cards works, but in order to get stereo audio from CD-ROM emulation, you need to either have an internal RGB mod like the ones that Jaguar makes that specifically supports it, or you need the EDFX, or now you could buy or mod a DB graphics booster with the same audio circuit. So any of the ones purchased from Castlemania Rondo from this moment on will have this built in. So you could buy it right now, plug it in, and have this working. And any existing one, if you want, you could follow the diagram that Jaguar created and posted here, or allowed me to post here if you want to update your own. So at this point, if you're looking for a plug-and-play solution for your PC Engine or TurboGrafx, I have two suggestions for you. Do you only need RGB and then maybe composite video, and you only need one of those signals at a time? Then the EDFX is probably the better one to get because it is a bit cheaper. I think it's $20 cheaper, and it's small and it just works. If you want to get one that has one of those custom cases, it's a little bit more money, but it looks awesome. However, if you need S-video output, or if you need simultaneous composite, S-video, and RGB, or dual composite video, should you actually want that for whatever reason, then the DB graphics booster is definitely the one to get, and it's only 20 bucks more. So I love that there's kind of options for everybody. Of course, if you want an internal version, I would strongly recommend the ones that Jaguar does, because you could get a bunch of different things that are really not possible with the external ones. So obviously you could integrate the DIN in a no-cut fashion directly into your console, which if you only have one, that's awesome. But if you have multiple PC engines or TurboGrafx, then the externals are better. But you could also get the correct color palette on S-Video, whereas it's not something you could get with the external versions, because that gets S-Video from RGB, which doesn't have the different color palette built in. That is a whole other discussion in itself. You might want to just search RetroRGB for that if you want more info on it. But basically, I think everybody is pretty clear as to whether they would want an internal or external mod, and any of the external ones are going to have the same, basically the same issues with the color palette. Composite video is going to look fine. RGB and S-Video are going to look great, just different. So check out the post if you want links to everything and if you want to mod your own. But I just think it's awesome now that, what was the best and then went to the second best is now tied for the best for plug and play solutions for those. So you just don't have to worry about modding unless you really want to, and you could just plug the sucker in. So thanks to Jaguar for working on the circuit and sharing it with everybody for free. And thanks to Ryan for making sure that these all have that mod installed before shipping out to customers. And all of them will be tested, of course, before shipping to customers, just to make sure everything was done right and everything works. But yeah, this is awesome. Next up, Greg from LaserBear has just released rack mounts for the Gscart and Gcomp switches. So if you're somebody that loads your retro setup in a server rack or AV rack or something like that, or maybe you have just all of the equipment that you use that doesn't need to be seen in a rack, and you display your consoles, whatever else, I think you all know who you are. If you need to rack mount your switches, now you absolutely have a solution. The price is $35 plus shipping, and the Gcomp should fit every revision, and the Gscart should fit the latest revision, which is 5.3, and I think that's been out for a couple of years, as well as the previous version 5.2. So that's, I think, most of the ones that are on the market now anyway. So I just think this is absolutely awesome for anybody that wants to rack mount their stuff. And if you don't get this one, because this one isn't for you. But I have a feeling there's going to be a larger number of people than you would expect listening going, oh, racks? Yes, that's what I have. Let me go get one of those. So I absolutely wanted to share it. And thanks to Greg for making these. Next up, Tito from Macho Nacho Productions just posted a video about an awesome new feature for smart PlayStation 2 memory cards called Multi-Purpose Memory Card Emulation, or MMCE from BBSon 2K, that essentially allows you to launch games right from those memory cards. So that'll work with the MemCard Pro 2, any of the MemCard Pro 1s that are compatible with the free software update, as well as the more do-it-yourself option, the SD to PSX. And this is more compatible than some of the other revisions that allowed you to use an SD card slot through the memory card in order to load games. I actually am really looking forward to doing hopefully a live stream, just kind of testing this out and just playing a couple of games, especially ones with FMV scenes that were known to not work in the other methods, just to see compatibility. But I strongly recommend it. Well, first of all, if you already own a Memcard Pro 2 or a compatible one or one of the SD to PSXs, just load this firmware up. You get a whole bunch of stuff with it. And even if not all the games you want to play works from it, I feel like this is a much easier way of getting games on your console than most other methods. I think RetroNAS is by far the easiest way because you just drop it on your network share and never worry about it. But not everybody has that set up or would want that for their setup. So please check out this video. I'm so impressed with what could be done now with this. I never thought this would be possible to have it so seamless. And if you also want more info on the Memcard Pro 2, check out that video as well. But yeah, links to everything are right here. And I really hope that I get to do a live stream in the next week or so, just kind of going through this and showing everybody how it works. And I have a brand new Memcard Pro 2 here. I sent my other one to a friend, so I bought this one. It is untouched. So the live stream would be setting this up from scratch with this new feature and the firmware update. So hopefully this would be something that I could help people out with that haven't done this process yet. But cross your fingers that I'll be able to do that this week. There's been some updates to the Sega Saturn emulator called Kronos. First, a new version was released that has some fixes in it and makes a bunch of games that were not previously playable able to be played. There's a video kind of showing some of the different improvements and the compatibilities if you're interested in that. And also, the main developer said that they're not going to be working on it anymore and they're going to be moving on to other projects. So that's kind of sad because this was originally just a fork of the Yabusei emulator. And I think there's been a bunch of very cool progress with it. But if anybody else wants to step up and kind of help work on this, check out the links. And I think there's a GitHub and also a Discord if anybody wants to step up. But I just, I always kind of see these things from both sides. I'm always sad to see a dev walk away from a project, but I'm always super appreciative for all the work that was done. And I think everything's out there on GitHub for anybody that wants to help continue the work. So if you want more info and you want to check out that video, please check out Dan's post. And yeah, just Kronos seems like a pretty awesome emulator. And if it's something that you want to use to play Saturn games, give it a try. Next up, Songbird Productions is now selling some more official reprints of Atari Jaguar games. There are 2 homebrew games, Wormhole 2000 and Spidex, as well as an official reprint of Atari Karts, the infamously terrible Atari Jaguar game that was a bad clone of Super Mario Kart. And the prices are $90 for Atari Karts and $80 for the other ones. And if you're somebody who prefers to have original cartridges and you like physical media, definitely consider these, especially Atari carts, because original cartridges are really, really expensive if you want to pick those up used. And I honestly think it's kind of a must try for Jaguar users. Obviously, you could use a ROM cart or just use emulation. Obviously, I'm a massive fan of the Big Pimu emulator and the upcoming Mister stuff. Try it out for free, of course, because you want to experience the terribleness yourself. But I definitely think it's something that you would want to show people. And if you want to buy the original cart, picking up this complete in box version that's essentially identical to the original is probably a way more cost effective. I mean, you could buy all 3 of these for less than the price of, I think, just one of the ones I've seen on eBay, or maybe at least 2 of them. But yeah, I always tell people when you play the Jaguar, you got to play Atari Karts just to experience what the disappointment would have been if you were a kid and got it. But you also have to play Tempest 2000, which in my opinion is the best game on the platform. And speaking of Tempest 2000, Wormhole 2000 is a love letter to that. I don't want to say a clone of it because I don't mean to be disrespectful. I mean that as a compliment. But basically, if you were a fan of Tempest 2000, you might be a fan of Wormhole 2000. And Spidex is also kind of a neat looking game as well. So I have links to videos of both of those homebrew games if you're interested. So check those out and see if that's something you'd want to buy physical media of. But links to absolutely everything are in the post, and it was definitely very fun seeing an official reprint of Atari Karts get sold because it's so bad you kind of have to own it if you love the Jaguar and you have a bunch of original games for it. Now it's time for this week's Mr. Updates, care of Lou from Lou's Retro Source. As usual, I'm going to skim through these and just add my thoughts where I feel like it, but if you want visual examples and a ton more info, please check out Lou's video. First up, Aerial Aces showed off some new NFC cards for Zapparoo, and some of them are etched wooden NFC cards, which are pretty awesome. So if you're into that stuff, definitely check those out. Next, the JT Win 16 core added support for Kubrick, which is an arcade puzzle game. And also, from now on, all Hotego cores will have 32-way joystick support with variable speed when using an analog stick on non-analog stick games. So what that means is, if you have this connected with original arcade sticks, nothing's changing. If it's a game that had an original analog control, it'll work the same if you have analog controls. But if it's a game that didn't originally have them, you now have the ability to use your analog stick to do that. So games like Gradius 2, using a gamepad with an analog stick, you could move your ship smoothly in diagonals, which is not something you could do in the original. So stuff like this, I always get super excited about, because now you could technically do more than you could have ever done with the original. And I think most people use some kind of controllers that do have analog sticks in them. So this is a pretty awesome update. I would definitely try it out and see, and maybe, if anybody has any suggestions in the comments of what's the best games to try this out with, I'd love to see that. And I think other people might appreciate that as well. There's also been some updates and bug fixes too. Also, if you'd like to test some of the latest changes to the Jaguar core, there's a dedicated thread on the Mr. Forum that has the latest build available. The update to the test core was released on January 23rd, and the only changes mentioned that there are cropping for NBA Jam and Flip Out. But honestly, a single core compatible Atari Jaguar, or single RAM stick compatible Atari Jaguar core, sorry, cold is really messing with my head, but I think that's incredible, and I really hope that games like Tempest 2000 with the spinner are available to play, because while I joked about Atari carts, I do truly think you need to play that and Tempest with the spinner to just experience the best that the Jaguar had to offer. So thank you to everybody who's been working on this Jaguar core. Next up, a Technos 16 core has been released by the Coin-Op collection, which runs Double Dragon 3, Combat Tribes, sorry if I'm getting that one wrong, and WWF WrestleFest, which is kind of awesome. Next, the next game challenge on the Mr. Discord is for the arcade game Dig Dug, which is a single credit score challenge that goes till February 9th. Next, Tandy Logan posted an update that allows you to incorporate your updated template. Wow, sharp today, aren't I? Tandy Logan posted an updated template that allows you to incorporate your own images into NFC card labels. It's in PSD format and available on GitHub for free. Lou showed an example of this in his video where you could basically drag and drop whatever images you want on pre-existing templates. It's very awesome to make that just something that we could all download. So thank you for that. Next, you could now get test builds of the Saturn core that supports the Sega STV arcade games, which were arcade games that were essentially arcade versions of Saturn games, but on cartridge rather than CD. You could get the unstable builds that run it, and you could get a list of STV games all right in the post here. But this is exciting because I've only played the arcade version of Radiant Silvergun a handful of times, I think, and it was cool. It's something I want to go back and play and really sit and kind of try, because I stink at those games, but I love playing them. So hopefully I could have some time to give that a try. And also, the user RetroSwim on the Mr. Discord updated the PCXT core to the latest framework and also added support for analog video output via the newer I/O boards. And that's a PC core for early IBM PCs and Tandy computers. So, as always, thank you to Lou for keeping up with all of this stuff. There's no way I could do it, and I'm very happy to support him on Patreon. And if you rely on his updates as much as I do, please consider doing so as well. But if nothing else, just subscribe on YouTube because it's free and Lou's videos are awesome. Next up, PixelFX have just announced that their RetroGEM HDMI mod now supports the 3DO console. You could buy those kits with an adapter flex cable to go directly to the 3DO consoles, and it's compatible with everything that doesn't have an Anvil chip built in. So essentially, the Anvil chips were in either FZ10s that were made in the late 1995 or the Gold Star GDO 202 consoles. Everything else should be fine. The majority of 3DOs should be compatible, but the ones with that Anvil chip will probably never be compatible with an RGB or HDMI mod due to the way that they're made. So any 3DO except those this should work on. The price is the same, $120 for the software locked version and $190 if you want to pay the ransom to get 1080p. And I think if you're looking to do a true digital to digital mod to go directly to a display or an HDMI scaler, then this is definitely something to consider. There really aren't any good pictures of it, although there is an installation video that Dan posted that has everything you would need to know, although Dan should probably invest in some better lighting for his bench for these videos. But I watched most of it. It's definitely good enough if you wanted to do this installation yourself. And it does appear to be a no-cut mod where you put it in place of the RF jack. And I believe this video even shows the installation of the RGB kit if you wanted to convert yours over. However, you might just want an RGB kit. And speaking of 3DO RGB kits, Retro Gamer Stuff has just listed the final stock of those kits, and this could be the last time you're able to purchase those, at least from a store. It's open source, so you can make your own, but this could be the last time it's available. And this is the same board that Dan, Citrus 3000 PSI of Pixel FX, released a couple years ago. I did a launch video on it that, while the video is kind of old, it has all of the info that you would need to know about it. It's all still relevant, and it's an absolutely awesome mod. Much like the HDMI mod, it's compatible with everything that doesn't have an Anvil chip in it, so most 3DOs out there. And I really think that this is something that you should consider, especially if you're mostly gaming on analog equipment. So for me personally, and I don't think everybody else should do this, I'm just saying, my opinion for what I like to do. I love having original consoles only on CRTs. So for me personally, I would definitely get this mod because I would never really need the HDMI out from the console. It's also a no-cut mod. It includes the 240p 480i switch, which basically any game that's compatible that's not an FMV will look better in 240p for this style of game. And I just think it's absolutely awesome. Obviously, if you already only have RGB monitors, or if you have, analog scalers that you're going to be sticking with, then this is probably all you need, and you can save yourself a little bit of money. Of course, if you do want a digital to digital mod, just get the RetroGEM that I just mentioned. But yeah, I think this is absolutely awesome. I don't think it's any less cool than the day it was released. I think there's just choices for everybody. And the only thing I would really just say is, if you're on the fence about this, but you think you might want one, this could very well be the last batch ever made of these. Maybe one of those clone companies will pick up the 3D or the open source design and make low quality versions of it, which you should always avoid because they're never good. Maybe you could just make your own if you wanted to in the future, but because there's an HDMI alternative available, I don't see any other stores taking the risk to make these. So I'm not trying to FOMO you into buying one of these. I just gave you the HDMI alternative, but I am saying that if you're like, I do have an RGB monitor, S-Video looks fine, but I could benefit from that 240p as well and the video upgrade, just pick this one up because you're probably never going to get a chance to get this one again. And, that's both because there's an alternative available, but also because Retro Gamer Stuff is sadly still closing. So the store will remain open to fulfill all orders, and just no new products are being added. And when all stock runs out, that's it. The store closes. So yeah, if you are on the fence about buying an RGB mod for your 3DO, now is absolutely the time because you might not have another choice. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to anybody who supports in absolutely any way, because it's really you who's keeping all this stuff going. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.